everyone, and welcome to this week's lesson. I expect you've been spending a lot of time outside this week, and so I thought we could draw something that reflects that lovely late summer lazy mood, and this is what I found. I like this because it's a still life with fruit, but there's the sort of interesting discipline of the lettering here of the Pimm's bottle, and there's good strong contrast. I had this idea that just to get to know the picture, I would just do a sort of preliminary drawing in coloured crayons. And to be honest, I enjoyed it so much that I decided that this week's lesson is going to be about using coloured pencils. So if you want to do it in watercolour, by all means do, or indeed do both. Do one in coloured pencils and then do one in watercolour afterwards. That would be fun. The pencils I've got, these are the ones, I actually just picked them up from Tesco's. They cost me £3.50. They're sort of okay, but obviously there are better ones on the market. So to be honest, as I said, they're not the best quality, but I enjoy the colouring so much, I'm going to invest in some better ones, and then we can, you know, I'll think about doing some more lessons with coloured pencils, and indeed do a review of them in a later video. If you need to buy some crayons, Jackson's are, they do have a very good selection, so if you want to buy online, there's a link at the bottom, and that means you can get a 10% discount. So what do we need? Let's start off with the paper. You can use your watercolour paper if you want to, but if you've got very rough watercolour paper, you will find that the crayons will fall into the tooth, and you'll find it very difficult to get flat solid colour unless you use a solvent. And to be honest, these crayons, they're not waxy enough to work well with the solvent. So I would recommend some sort of paper that's specifically for crayons, or multimedia, or indeed some sort of hot pressed paper, so you can get a nice smooth surface. This is Daler-Rowney Mixed Media Art Board, which I rather like because it's got quite a thickness to it. It is literally like a piece of cardboard and lovely and smooth, so it's nice to work on where drawing's concerned. You also need some rubbers. I've got a number of them. I use them in different ways really. This is my trusty mechanical rubber, which is great because it can take out fine little bits of mistake. Let me show you. Right, now with an ordinary rubber, if you want to take out a very fine detail, you often find that you sort of over rub, and you have to press really quite hard, and then you have to go back in and tidy up the edges to get the shape you wanted to. Another thing you can do is actually use an eraser mask. So you can put something like this on and rub out like that, which is quite handy. See if I can press a bit harder. A bit like that. This is where the mechanical pencil comes in. This one's quite a cheap one. I'd recommend investing in quite a good one because it'll last you better. But you can just rub out tiny little bits and have full control, or indeed you can rub out through the mask and press even harder, which works fairly well. Putty rubbers are very handy because you can soften really quite large areas, and indeed merge areas as well. And another thing that comes in really quite handy is just using tape. You find that if you want to just lighten an area, you can take off just the sort of soften it a little bit just by using tape. This is just the ordinary masking tape, but you can use sellotape as well, or any other tapes you might have to hand. And in terms of pencil sharpeners, I've got hundreds of the things. Sometimes it's quite nice to be sort of contemplative and stop, and you can sharpen your pencils or indeed your crayons with an ordinary knife. But it takes an awfully long time. So you're better off using, I think, more often than not, a pencil sharpener. Surprisingly, I've found that the cheaper ones tend to be better. It's a sort of trial and error thing. This thing is a marvel of German engineering. It feels lovely in the hand. It was, yeah, I thought it was the best thing ever when I bought it. Got it home, actually no good for sharpening pencils. This, I think, came out of a lucky bag or something. Very cheap little thing, but it's just brilliant. I absolutely love it. I bought these in bulk when I was doing a children's class, thinking good quality pencil sharpeners, they could have one each. They turned out to be not terribly good at all. And this is actually my favourite. I went to Blenavon, to the big pit, and you know they have these gift shops. And this is just lovely. It's got a little reservoir for holding all the bits and bobs, and it sharpens really, really well. So, as I said, swings and roundabouts, just see what you can find, and obviously the most expensive isn't necessarily. Brushes are very handy just to tidy up after yourself, because often when you're crayoning, and particularly in weather like, you know, like it's been this week, it's been so hot, you're a little bit sweaty, you don't really want to do that over your work. Just find a nice little brush. This came, it's a sort of kabuki makeup brush, which they theoretically can be hugely expensive, but this came from the pound shop, and it's just a nice little soft brush that you can get rid of your bits and pieces with. Right, now if you want to use coloured pencils, there's a number of things I need to tell you about. First of all, I want to talk about pressure. Now, the pressure you use is very, very important because it enables you to build up layers, and obviously the different pressures deliver different amounts of pigment. Don't hold your pencil too close to the bottom because you've got more control if you hold it about here. So if we start off with a bit of light pressure, you can see that it's obviously fairly soft, and you can build on that. Medium pressure obviously delivers a lot more of the pigment to the paper, and then heavy pressure, you're pressing harder but still holding the pencil on the side. If you press hard from the top, obviously you're digging into the paper and you're making sort of trenches that would be very, very difficult to remove. So you can press harder by applying more pressure, but not in single points. And you can see obviously the heavy pressure is a lot darker than the medium or the light. The other thing I want to talk about is the stroke that you use. The stroke is very important to the mood of the picture. It's also very much a matter of personal taste. So you can shade with straight lines like this, little circles, something like that. Or indeed cross-hatching, which is when you're doing the straight lines in one direction and then again from other directions. What you need to do is, it's very much a matter of personal taste, but you need to be consistent. Within your picture you want to use one particular sort of shading, otherwise it'll just look messy. The other thing to be aware of is layering. What you can do is build up the colour. If we start with this first layer here, second layer from here to here, you can see that's more intense, and the third layer more saturated. So this is fairly soft, this is medium tone, and that's more saturated. And you can build that up with different colours as well. Now, burnishing is something that's done with either a light colour white pencil or a colourless pencil to create a smooth, glossy texture with added vibrancy. And it also helps to merge all the lines together. So when you've pretty much finished and added as much colour as you think you need, you can burnish over the top. So if I do a couple of squares here. Right, this one I'm going to burnish with a white pencil. Often they come free in the set, or you might buy a separate burnishing pencil. And can you see it sort of pulls it all together and makes it quite flat. Once you've burnished, you can still go on and add more colour. This one is, we'll do this with a grey. And you can possibly see where it's so it makes it sort of flat. What's also very important is for you to be aware of transitions. When you're going from maybe a pink to a blue, you want to be aware of the fact that in certain cases you want that transition to be seamless. So we've got this blue here. And we want the transition to start happening somewhere in the middle. So this is fairly dark, this end. Slowly soften them. So hopefully there isn't a hard line where the pink turns into blue. Add more colour to your transitions for depth and interest. So with this transition from yellow to brown, darker brown here, but right at the end the brown's more sort of purpley. It makes it warmer and more interesting. So really it's add more colours. Don't think of just simple transition between one colour and another. Try and make them a little bit more interesting in that sense. Right, we've got two greens here which you could darken with a black. Let me just get the black from here and I'll just show you what that looks like. It's slightly disappointing. You do get a darker green, particularly if you layer it, but it's not ideal. But if you use some of the blues, it's so much more vibrant. You get a darker version of itself. And if you should indeed still want to go darker and you want to add some black, you could at that point, but then you're darkening a bluey green as opposed to the vibrant green. Right, now this is the picture I've been working on. The great thing about these crayons is that you can keep building and building and building, so you can't sort of do the equivalent that is so easy to do in watercolours when you overpaint. So keep blending until you're happy. Better quality crayons obviously will let you blend for longer, but it's a lovely activity. Once you've got your main picture down on the paper, you can keep layering up. As I said, I didn't actually do any drawing with this at all. I started pretty much here and worked out. I do want to mention though that if you do drawing, make sure that you rub over it quite lightly to make sure that you haven't got heavy lines, because it'll take away from the subtlety of all that lovely blending you've been doing. I can't wait to see what you come up with. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.